Hey everyone, we're about to jump into something that is, well, both fascinating and really, really human. We're going to explore this totally surprising connection between empathy and what it means to tell the truth.
I mean, think about it. Is it always the right thing to do? To tell the absolute 100% truth? Now, most of us, our gut reaction is, yeah, of course, honesty is everything, right? But what happens when that simple rule runs smack into the real, messy world of human feelings?
Right. Let's get specific. Picture this. You're a doctor, and your patient has a terminal diagnosis. Telling them the full, unfiltered truth might give them control, sure, but it could also just completely crush their spirit. It could snuff out any little bit of hope they had left. So what's the right call? What's the caring thing to do?
And this is where things get really weird. Brand new global data shows a statistical link that's kind of mind-bending. It turns out the more someone's values are wired for empathy and taking care of the community, the more likely they are to agree that, yeah, sometimes a doctor should conceal a diagnosis to lessen the suffering. Wait, what? How can the most empathetic people be the ones leaning towards, well, what looks like hiding the truth? That's the puzzle we're going to piece together today.
So, yeah, let's dive right into this compassionate dilemma and look at the actual numbers that bring this whole paradox to light.
Okay, so this is the number at the heart of it all, positive 0.1686. Now, I know it looks like a small, random number, but in statistics, this is a big deal. It's what's called a positive correlation. It shows a clear, statistically real link between people who value things like empathy, we'll call those green values, and being okay with a doctor sometimes withholding a diagnosis. It's not a massive link, but it's definitely a clear signal. And to get why, we need a way to unlock this. And that key is a model called spiral dynamics. All it is, really, is a way of mapping out how our values and worldviews develop. The big idea is that different people, even whole societies, are basically running on different psychological operating systems, each with its own ideas about what's right and wrong. So let's see what happens when we look at this medical dilemma through the lenses of these different value systems. This is what we're calling the colors of conscience. This table just lays out the conflict so clearly. Okay, so if you're operating from a blue system, which is all about order, rules, and moral duty, the answer is easy. Tell the truth, period. It's the law, it's your duty. Now for the orange system, which is driven by logic, results in individual freedom, the priority is patient autonomy. You have to give the patient all the facts so they can make their own rational choice. But then you get to green. And for green, the highest priority is emotional health. It's about protecting the person's spirit. And all of a sudden, telling the absolute truth isn't the most important thing anymore. Compassionate care is. But get this, green isn't the only one with a strong take. The red value system, which is all about power and control, actually agrees even more strongly than green. From a red point of view, holding back information is just a way of showing power. The strong get to decide what the weak can handle. And then on the total opposite end, you have orange, with a strong negative correlation. For orange, hiding facts is just illogical, inefficient, and a complete violation of a person's right to choose for themselves. So let's be fair and break down the green position here. The argument for what's called compassionate protection is basically that truth is supposed to serve people, not the other way around. It's about using compassion in a specific context. But there is a very strong counterargument. Critics would say this is just harmful paternalism. We know what's best for you. They'd argue it destroys the trust between a doctor and patient, and frankly, it goes against all the evidence that shows most patients, even with terrible news, want to know the truth. This whole idea that the exact same action can be seen as either kind or cruel, depending on who's looking, it points to something we can call an action's hidden wiring. And we're about to see how this wiring runs through everything, way beyond a doctor's office. I love this analogy. Think about it like this. A manager's decision is like a pill. You think you know what it's going to do, right? But the company's culture, its dominant operating system, is the patient. And depending on that patient's unique psychological makeup, that exact same pill can have completely different, sometimes even opposite side effects. Okay, let's use a real-world example. A company forces employees to take unpaid vacation. In a purple or tribal culture, this might be seen as a kind of shared sacrifice for the good of the tribe. It could even make them feel closer. But in an orange, achievement-focused culture, no way. It's seen as inefficient, a roadblock to their goals. They're probably updating their LinkedIn profile that same day. And then in a green, community-based culture, it's seen as acceptable, but only if it's framed as a way to save everybody's jobs. See? Same pill, 3 totally different reactions. So if we can actually understand this hidden wiring, does that mean we can start to predict how people will react? Well, that's exactly what this next part is all about, predicting the ripple effect. This is where it all leads, to a predictive model. And it's actually pretty straightforward. Step 1, you input an action. Let's stick with our original example. Gently withhold a diagnosis. Step 2, the model filters that action through this massive database of over 13,000 known correlations, all that hidden wiring we've been talking about. And then step 3, it spits out a prediction. It calculates what the new psychological state of that group will be, forecasting all the ripple effects on things like trust and fear. To put it another way, it's basically like a GPS for culture. It knows where your team is right now, psychologically speaking. You tell it where you want to go, say to a state of higher stability, and it calculates the best route to get there, the path with the fewest psychological car crashes, the path of least resistance. So, where does this all lead? Well, it builds to something pretty profound. Let's talk about what it means to have a new calculus for care. What happens when something as soft as human psychology starts to look like a solvable equation?
This brings us to a really provocative thought. What if, in a really weird way, the algorithm is almost more empathetic than the human? It sounds wrong, doesn't it? Algorithms are cold, right? Humans are empathetic. But what if we've got that backwards?
Here's the logic behind that crazy idea. A human manager, even with the best intentions, is always going to be trapped by their own biases. We just assume everyone sees the world like we do. But an algorithm, it has no ego, it doesn't project its own feelings, it just looks at the data from everyone, the blue people, the orange, the green, the red, and it gives all their fears and values equal weight. It's like empathy at scale. It can actually consider the conscience of the whole group at once. And that leaves us with one last massive question to chew on. We started with a simple choice a doctor might make, a choice driven by empathy. And we've seen how that very human feeling can be measured, modeled, and even predicted. So, if empathy is something we can compute, what else is? What other fundamentally human things are about to become a matter of calculation? Something to think about. Thanks for tuning in.